Welcome to the Enneagram Global Summit, 9 Essential Pathways for Transformation. This session is called the Platinum Connection, Healing a Divided Society Using the Power of the Enneagram. Our faculty today is Dr. Deborah Egerton. Deborah is the president of Trinity Transition Consultants, and she is an internationally respected psychotherapist. She has taken the Enneagram and her work, the Platinum Connection, out into the world. This work is designed to empower people with new language, tools, and skills to give voice courageously to a powerful shift in consciousness. Deborah, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me, Jessica. I'm very excited to be a part of this once again.
Well, you know, we've named here in the title, right up front there, Divided Society. And these words, divided society, divided culture, all of that is so in the world zeitgeist in just about every country in the world. And I think that one of the things in the Enneagram field that we've been knowing in our bodies, hearts, and minds for years is that the power of it is meant to be a transformative tool in the world. And we've been looking for ways to bring it into the realm of education and health and politics and social constructs and social activism. And here you have actually created an organization that is addressing the divisions and addressing in powerful ways how to heal that. And, you know, as you have said, these conversations that you're having through the Platinum Connection are essential for the survival of humanity and for the continued evolution of our species. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about the Platinum Connection and how, as you say, it allows people to meet others from wherever we are and from wherever they are, and to begin a journey together.
Well, the first thing that I have to say about the Platinum Connection is that the knowledge of the Enneagram is what makes all of this possible. Because for all of us, we have our own way of viewing the world and our own way of being in the world. And unfortunately, when we bump up against people who think a little differently, who maybe look differently, who have different cultures and customs, that can be a little confounding. Some people embrace it, other people run from it, some people ignore it. But through the Platinum Connection and by bringing people together, whether it be in the workplace or in communities, they are able to, as they study the Enneagram, begin to see that we are more alike than we are different, and that when you begin to get down to the core of any human being, the most important thing is the respect for our humanity and the willingness to embrace our oneness and our connection as one, if we intend to move forward and to evolve as human beings. And by actually giving people some of the tools and language and skills that they can use if they're doing their Enneagram work, aligning them with additional tools and skills to have conversations or to intervene when something is happening that's uncomfortable or unfair or unjust. It's actually giving people something to go out in the world and be able to take part and to become a force for good. I feel very saddened by the reality that the voices of bigotry and bias and disrespect are so loud and so active. And the most important thing to me with the Platinum Connection and taking the time to actually teach people how they can be a part of what is called a natural universal movement, to be able to enter the arena in a comfortable fashion by having created a safe space inside themselves, and that comes from the Enneagram and knowing yourself, and then to be able to add some things to that that will allow you to speak up and to make a contribution.
You know, it's very powerful what you're saying, Deborah, because I know that you were interested in all of these matters of the divided society, divided culture, bigotry, racism, sexism, you know, all of this gender issues. You were interested in this even before you knew the Enneagram. And here you are saying to us that this work you're doing would not be possible without the Enneagram, that it's my sense from what you're saying is that you're discovering it's giving people a sense of empowerment and practicality about how to engage with these issues.
Jessica, that is absolutely correct. I have done this work before the Enneagram, and I have done this work through the Enneagram as I studied it myself and began to learn as much as I possibly could. And as you well know, you never stop learning with the Enneagram. When I recognized the power of it and began to align it with my work around social justice and addressing all of the isms, what I was able to actually reveal and that other people began to see is that when we are having these discussions and we're having them from a place of knowledge and awareness of our own Enneagram type, and possibly some awareness of the Enneagram type of the people that we are interacting with, we were making so much more progress. One of the examples that I'd like to use is that when I would go into organizations and just do diversity training and try to get people to come together and learn about just basic respect, and we would do diversity training and sexual harassment prevention, awareness and prevention. Before I added the Enneagram to that work, it was almost painful for people to sit through diversity training because they either didn't feel like they needed it or they didn't want it. So what I was working with were people who were very shut down, who really were either angry because they had to be in a group and discuss differences, or they were just totally disengaged. It didn't apply to them. And it was an interesting phenomenon because when we talk about the divided society, even if we just talk about black and white, you know, sometimes in diversity training, white people would be angry because they had to come. Black people would be angry because they felt like they didn't need it. And the Enneagram began to be that transformative tool where we were all beginning in the same place. We were learning about ourselves. And as I would teach people the Enneagram, I would watch an opening of the heart. I would watch the actual presence. People would wake up, and instead of being completely tuned out, they would open up and be willing to learn about themselves. And then some of the things that they were so angry about, they began to understand through the Enneagram that, you know, we have these, these personality structures that we have come into the world with. And wow, if we do some work with that, it can really change how we view so many things. So the Enneagram work is absolutely revolutionary for any type of work around diversity, culture, and trying to break through the isms in our world.
You know, this work seems like it really proves through the understanding that the personal is political and the political is personal, because you're talking about how people feeling safe and empowered to make personal change are then more effective at being able to create cultural, societal, and political change.
That's very true. And one of the main points about that, Jessica, is that it is so important for people to develop the internal safety and sort of what we call intestinal fortitude to speak comfortably their truth and to stand in their truth. And with and through the Enneagram, you can get to that place where, first of all, you begin to know what your truth is. You're not just picking up sound bites or messages from other people and taking them on as your own. You are discovering your own truth. And so very often when you discover your own truth, you then have the capacity to release bias. You then have the capacity to look at other human beings as part of you, as being connected to you. So all of the isms that you have allowed to be out there because they are not attached to you, they're not your problem, they then become, well, if it's happening to you, it's also happening to me. And there is nothing outside of the Enneagram that I believe that has the power to do that. Not without people, that take the time to do that kind of work. And I want to also clarify, there's the work of the Enneagram, which many of us recognize is spiritual as well as psychological. It has so many facets to it that allow us to grow and develop. So people can, of course, read their Bible, as I do, and do their Enneagram work or study A Course in Miracles. But if you're actually working and doing the work that the Enneagram takes you to, you can find your truth and you can stand in your truth.
So I think that concept of find your truth, stand in your truth, speak your truth is probably pivotal to the whole idea of the platinum connection. Can you say a little bit more about when people learn to speak their truth, stand in their truth, are they also able to allow others to speak their truth without fear, and then a greater sense of oneness than when we just thought there was one way of doing things?
Absolutely. I'd like to talk a little bit about how that even applies to the different Enneagram types. Standing in your truth and speaking your truth is a very important thing, as we all know, because if we're not able to do that, and if we stand by and we allow the truth of injustice, the reality of some people who do not want to change, or they don't want to even consider the possibility that we are all connected and we are all one. If we allow that to dominate the earth, then we watch society disintegrate, and we watch it happen all over the world. But the empathy and the compassion that develops from learning and standing in your own truth does allow you to recognize that you can, in fact, hear someone else's story, which is their truth, and not reinterpret their reality. So that softens the entire sort of trajectory of where the conversation goes. I will find sometimes, and I'll start right with my eights, who are so often very engaged or disengaged. Engaged and wanting to speak up if they don't like what they hear and they don't like what someone else is saying, or sometimes just totally shut down because they don't want to be in the room where any of these conversations are taking place. But as they learn to stand in their own truth and speak what they believe to be true, I have discovered over time that so many of my eights come back with a very different truth than what they began with. And they will enter and speak, but I see the softening in a way where there is not the domination of the conversation. I see the active work that eights are then doing to make sure that what they're engaged in and what they want to do, or if they want to be a part of trying to make something better, they become very good listeners. And they will ask questions, and sometimes those questions are challenging. But I have to say, Jessica, they're asked in a different tone, rather than in a sometimes very forceful or intimidating tone. It is actually a tone that says, I want to know this because I want to be in this with you. And it is a beautiful unfolding of watching the growth and development of a very strong type taking a different stance, but taking the stance in a way where others are so happy to see this person kind of on their team or part of the solution that people are trying to get to. And to watch them become excellent listeners, and to watch the beauty of the two that's blossoming in the eight at that moment, because the compassion and the empathy is just so very apparent.
Beautiful. Would you like to continue with type 9 then?
Well, with my nines that come into the room, there is the sort of leaning back initially and checking out what this is going to be all about, what we're going to be discussing. And my nines also, once again, are sometimes disengaged, but they also are listening for relevancy. How is this relevant? What is this going to amount to? Have I just been called into this circle, or have I come to this seminar, this group, to accomplish something, or is this maybe a good time for me to zone out? But I watch my nines physically wake up, because a fascination for what is being discussed and how it is being discussed by going through the Enneagram and talking about the types and the way the types sort of manifest in the world, my nines, rather than leaning back, begin to lean forward. And as they lean forward, they're often listening to the thoughts of other people, and they will speak up and say, they'll ask that question that may be on everyone else's mind, but it will be the nine that actually says, we really need to understand more about how this is going to help us, or I really don't understand if I know what my truth is, how that's going to make a difference in my life or anyone else's. So the nines begin to surface some of the tougher questions for the group. And as those questions come out, the nines become increasingly more engaged and you see some of the beautiful mediation that the nine is so capable of, because they've listened to what so many other people are saying, but they're the ones that will actually bring that question right home, right to where it needs to be, and allow it to come into the group through their voice. And you watch the nine beginning to question their own truth in that moment. And I will say it's a wonderful thing how often I watch the nines linger after we've finished, because they have been thinking about so many of the different comments that other people have made, and then trying to align that with their own beliefs. But it is only through that process of the nine waking up, and it adds so much benefit and power and beauty to the group's discussion, because we have a nine who has woken up, and now they are expressing sort of the thought of the group, because they've been feeling this vibe of the group all along. And so that's been my experience with the nines.
Okay, well, I can see that we're building a powerful community here by each of these beings learning what they can contribute by actually being more present. So why don't you take us to the ones?
Well, the ones, and I have a very interesting experience always with the ones, because I am a one, and I can often see the process of what's happening with the ones, because it is a experience that, of course, I'm very familiar with. But very often the ones will come in with a deeply entrenched belief that they know is right. And as they stand in that belief, the discomfort becomes somewhat apparent. You can feel the one as they are speaking about what they believe to be true. You can feel the passion, and you can feel the justification. You can hear the justification. And the challenge then is always when the one recognizes that maybe there's another way of viewing this, watching the one sort of shift and try to put it through at a gut level first. Does it land in the gut in a way where they know that something else that they are hearing is a possibility? And I can see the actual physical discomfort that the one begins to go through in trying to figure out what truth is. Can it be possible that there are two truths? Can it be possible that two people can be in the same place, exposed to the same circumstances, and yet be having two entirely different experiences? And when the one becomes aware that that is not only a possibility, but actually in many cases a probability, there is a reaction or a response from the one where you can almost feel their pain in that moment. And many of the ones will begin to talk about situations that have occurred in their lives where they were so committed to going in a certain direction because they believed that to be true. And I've actually had several ones say, this is unraveling so much of what I have believed my entire life. To which my response has always been, that is not something that you should be afraid of, but you should take it in small steps and just allow yourself to be open to what comes, be open to the possibility that some of the things that you have been holding on to, that maybe they were not exactly what you thought they were because you were viewing them from a different perch. And so the ones will get to a place where once they have shifted out of an entrenched space in terms of believing that there was only this one way that things would go, whether it had to do with race or sexism or whether it had to do with gender, it didn't make religion, it didn't make any difference in any of these cases what the particular struggle was around. But once they could release that tight grip, you watch the one move to a place of opening in a way where the one small opening becomes wider and wider and wider, because at that point, the questioning of some of these, rigid stances that they've taken, it becomes very important for them to want to discover them. And I find that they do want to discover whether or not some of the rigid stances have been useful or harmful.
Okay, so a more awake body center contribution. So how about the heart center types?
The heart center types, when we begin with our twos, I watch the twos enter the circle trying very hard to remain in a loving space, and often believing that what they have put out into the world has been love, and will very often speak of love that has been rejected. For instance, there is sometimes a opinion that is put out there that says, I have tried to work with the diverse populations and sometimes they don't want my help, or I've been rejected. And we begin to discuss how important it is to meet people where they are. And with the ones, it has it has a lot to do sometimes with crossing over boundaries and not understanding how to respect the boundaries, particularly of different cultures. Maybe it's too much too soon. And when the twos begin to recognize that there is something that they can do to enhance being able to be a part of being helpful, they actually, they really brighten up and engage in a different way. And they come back and they share their stories of how they've managed to be much more successful in something that they were trying with a particular group than they have been in the past. So for the twos, it's a kind of a boundary thing that we begin to do some work around, and we watch how that works out well for them. But moving on into the heart center and looking at the threes, who are sometimes looking for validation from whatever it is, if they're going to be a part of this community, what's it going to accomplish? And I will find that the threes are sometimes skeptical that there's any possibility that it's going to work. So do they really want to be there? Do they want to be a part of this, or do they just want to watch it for a while and see if it's going to gain any momentum? When the threes do engage, the resourceful ideas that they bring to actually improve the way that all of the types sometimes are going about trying to work with whatever the communities or populations or teams that they're working with. Their ideas are just so very helpful once they have engaged in the process. The challenge with the threes is they almost want to see that it's going to be successful before they really want to commit to being a part of it. and keeping them aligned with the group can sometimes be challenging. But when we get our engaged threes, the level of resourceful information and ways that they can see that something can be done really adds so much power and optimism to a group where some of the types feel very stuck. Our threes help to unstick people in places where they don't feel like they're making any progress with some of the communities they're working with. And a similar experience with the fours, because their creative energy, they challenge the status quo. They challenge us on what's been done before and have a vision of perhaps doing it in a different way or adding some different tools that we haven't used with different types. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that after I finish with the all going through the types. But the fours are excellent at being able to see which tools, say diversity tools that we might use, line up well with which types, and which types need to do more work with other tools that we use for helping people with working with diverse populations. So the fours bring that creativity and that vision into our circles. And that takes us through the heart center,
which then takes us into the head center.
Exactly. And we get our head center folks in the mix. The fives come in, and once again, there's some skepticism because they want to know where this began, where it is now, and where it is going in the future. And I've seen many of my fives express a feeling that they don't really understand how we can ever really affect this change, and that it's going to take too long because there's so much work that needs to be done. But the group usually is very good about encouraging the fives, and I have a particular story that I'd like to share that tends to open up the fives in terms of possibilities. I share with them the story about being a 5-year-old girl and taking the first plane ride that I ever took in my life with my mom, and we were going to Alabama, and we had to stop and change planes in Birmingham to go on to Mobile, and I didn't have my seatbelt on, and so when the plane landed, something was wrong, landing gear failed or broken propeller. I was 5. I'm not sure what happened, but I found myself under the seat in front of me, looking up at my mother, who didn't look very pleased at the moment. And it was kind of her angry face, and she asked me what I was doing down there. I scurried back into my seat, and I tried to explain to my mom that, and she didn't want to hear it. She just said, just the next time I take you on a trip, Deborah, you're going to be old enough to carry your own suitcase, and you're going to know to keep your seatbelt fastened. And so she seemed particularly rattled, and I didn't understand why. But I had no idea of what we were about to go through when we got into the plane terminal. And when we got into the terminal, my mother was pushing my hair up under this really ugly hat, and she told me to go into the restroom, and she said, "Go in, be quick, come back out." And my mother, who was a 7 and who was always very elegant and kind of larger than life, she had on her big hat and her sunglasses when I went into the restroom, and when I came out, her sunglasses were off, her head was down, her hat was off, and I knew something was off. And I looked at my mom and I said, "What's the matter, Mom?" She said, I just want to get the heck out of here. And I couldn't have known at 5 years old that what my mother was doing was she was making herself small so that she could sell a lie. My mother had just sent me into the white bathroom so that I could go to a bathroom that she knew was going to be safe and clean, and she stood outside the restroom like she was my nanny. And I looked up at my mom and I said, "Well, Mom, what do you want to do?" And she said, "I just want to get the heck out of here." And I reached out and I took her hand and I said, "Well, then let's get the heck out of here." And we walked outside, and I watched my mom put on her sunglasses again, put her big hat on. I watched her breathe and become very erect with her posture. And she looked at me and she said, "Thanks, I needed that." And I share that story, surprisingly enough, with the whole group, but the fives have the strongest reaction to it. And the fives who have always been the ones who have said to me, "This is going to take too long, this is never going to happen," when I explained to them, yes, I've been at this since I was 5 years old, but I didn't know it, but it is happening, and we can do it one person at a time. The whole attitude and energy of the five begins to shift. And it's a very, very powerful moment for the entire group, because the fives who have maybe been sort of resistant to even being engaged are suddenly engaged, because they're in the headspace, they listen to all of that, but something in their heart space really begins to open up. And from there, I have some committed soldiers that are really out there trying to make a difference. I always have to stop a little because that story brings back so many memories, but it's probably the thing that got me started doing this work and recognizing that what happened to my mom, I'd never want another child to have to experience their parent make themselves small so that they can fit into a place and make their child safe. That was in my gut, that was in my heart, and now it's in my head, trying to discover ways to get us all engaged in this together. So I'll move on now to the six. The sixes, when they enter our circle, have so many questions. But the questions are, how are they going to be able to really be productive? And they tend not to enter with a lot of trust, but they do enter with curiosity, and they do enter with commitment once they can see how coming together and uniting and really embracing the reality that we are all one, it's like a relief for the six that I don't have to go this alone. Maybe I have found a body of human beings that really are going to be in this with me in a different kind of way. And so it feels like a truth that they can almost trust. And as long as that group is meeting and coming together and having the conversations, our sixes absolutely are right there, not just to do the work in a way where they're dutiful and responsible, but to do the work with a tremendous amount of energy, because for many sixes, I've heard the words, "I've been looking for this all my life. I've been looking for this all my life. This feels like something I can trust, and this feels like something that can help me make a difference." And then we get to my sevens, who of course, coming into anything, and if it seems like it's going to be long and drawn out and boring, we all begin to laugh about that after we've done our Enneagram work. And the sevens come up with the creative ideas and suggestions about different things that they feel we need to add to the process. But the growth for the seven is committing to actually being connected with this group in a way where we move forward together and that they don't jump out ahead of us, and where they don't disengage because it's not just moving as quickly as they want, or it's not as innovative or as much fun as they would like for it to be. But you see a very grounded seven engage this work. You see the ideas that begin to emerge from them to be grounded and solid, and not just ideas, but we see them engage in the implementation of what we might need to do differently. And they lift our spirits. They keep us kind of in a place where we're happy to be there, because we know that we can count on some of our sevens to actually lift us all up when we're feeling a little bit daunted because we just read something in the paper that was discouraging, or we're stuck on a particular issue where we're trying to decide, is there something that we can do? Is there a way that we can engage in this? But our sevens, rather than darting out ahead and leaving us behind, they stay and they encourage, and they actually give us a lot of hope for what can be. And it's just the best of all possible worlds.
It really does sound like the best of all possible worlds. I can't imagine that many people listening to this, Deborah, wouldn't want to see one of those trainings and even participate in one. So first, very briefly, I'd just like to ask you, how can people get involved in this work? And then in the few minutes we have left, I just have a few questions for you.
Okay. To get involved in the work, we do, of course, have a website, theplatinumconnection.com. And on the Platinum Connection, you can actually click Contact Us and let us know that you'd like to be involved or like more information, and we'll either send you out more information, or you can begin to post questions that we will respond to. In 2018, we're planning 2 more classes, and we're not charging for the classes because I think it's very important in the early stages of this to get people on board and to understand more of what it's about and what the possibilities are. As we go through the levels, this year, the people that I've actually been training are the people who are moving towards the ambassador level. And we have 12 ambassadors right now, people who have been working with me as we've developed this over time. And this year, we're looking at moving people from what we call engaged participants, which is where you come to the website and you ask questions and you just peek in and check and see what we're doing, to going up to the level of cultural allies, where you might want to sign up to actually come to a training and learning more of what it's about. And then the highest level is to become a Platinum Ambassador, and that's where you would enter the actual curriculum that is designed for becoming a Platinum Ambassador. And all of that information is on the website.
On platinumconnection.com, platinumconnection.com. Deborah, your story. That is a story that I'm sure many people held their breath listening to or felt a shudder of recognition, because there are just different ways that we encounter this kind of experience in life from one side or another, one facet or another. And it was very courageous and generous of you to share that story. You were looking all of your life of how to make a difference, and you described how the sixes often say that they've been looking for this all their life. So I have a sense as you've been sharing this, and I know you, and I know your integrity and your authenticity, that these trainings, like you said, the 7 will bring, real ideas, and then they'll be part of the actual doing of those ideas. So I have the sense that these trainings are powerful breeding places, laboratories for fomenting different projects. Is that true? People get inspired to do different things coming out of their newfound awareness of how to work with others?
Absolutely. I will tell you that it is having an impact from every level that I could possibly hope that it would have an impact in. When I think about the coworkers who have not wanted to work with each other for years, who actually lay down the axe and decide that they're going to have a new beginning. I have people who go back into their communities and they will begin conversation circles in their communities to try to address some of the things that are going on in a way that they haven't tried before, and who will come back to me or tap into me, email me, that they're having a certain level of success. What's the next step? How do I take it to the next level? But they're very willing to actually try and have conversations that they've never had before. I see people just engaging across the board, and I can't fail to make this point. One of the things about the Enneagram is that, for some people, they have believed that it is heady and it is for, people who just have time to think about such things. I really want to break through that myth, and I want to eliminate that stereotype, because I want you to know that whether I am working with a group of people who do maintenance work in an organization, or if I am working with a senior management team, or I am working with a religious community, it does not ever fail that the questions, the responses, the action that all of the work leads to is no less amazing or miraculous, irregardless of race, socioeconomic level, gender. It just works through every possible level of society. And that's why it is teaching so many people that we are connected as one. It is not a case of you get to live and I have to die. It is not a case of I can feed my children, but you can't feed yours. It is not a case, and it is not something that we should believe that I get to get a good education and your children don't get to go to school, or you don't get to go to school at all. It is not true that all of our children cannot grow up together and learn to love one another. But we have to do the work. And the Enneagram works when we use it, wherever we use it, with anyone that we use it with who is willing to try to change.
And by changing, they change the world.
Absolutely. We're living in a time where, for so many people, change just feels impossible. But I can tell you that doing this work, I have seen change one person at a time that is miraculous. And if that's what it takes, if each one of us are willing to do that work with individuals, it's going to change the world. And I love what the youth said recently. You know, we have good causes that are fighting good causes, and that hurts my heart. Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, White Lives Matter. The kids said, our lives matter. And that's what's true. All of our lives do matter, but we have to look at the reality that some people get treated differently. And when they get treated differently, we're really not just hurting that group of people, we're hurting ourselves.
Well, Deborah, you've had great power, strength, vision, clarity, and you're actualizing the work, the sacred work that the Enneagram points to in our culture. The Enneagram teaches us that we're not whole unless we see the importance and the beauty of each of the temperaments and each of the types and each of the essential qualities of those types. And now you're applying that to the principle of all people, that all beings are important and matter and have beautiful gifts to bring. And this is just a wonderful, inspiring session of possibility for our divided culture becoming a we culture. I want to thank you very much for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Jessica. It's a wonderful opportunity to be able to speak to as many hearts and minds and souls as possible, and for us to move forward as one in the world.
I'm with you. I'm with you, Deborah.
I know you are. Thank you, Jessica.